Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday on BookTube. So you might think, if horrible recent events hold true, that I will do a tag now for which I was not tagged by anybody. But that's not true. I will be doing that today, but I'm also going to do a tag that I was tagged on. Michael K. Vaughan tagged me in a tag called The Faces of Horror, which was created by Juan at Plagued by Visions, booktuber I mentioned the other day as being really, really good. I had at the time only watched a couple of his videos. I have now watched all of them. And he is as advertised. He is the real deal. And he made a horror story tag. And it was on my mind. I would have done it anyway because Michael tagged me, and that's very nice because not a lot of you tag me because you all hate me because I smell. But it's been on my mind anyway because I just yesterday announced Horror Mayhem, a May reading event put on by the Bookish Bryants, where we talk about horror. We read horror short stories, shorter horror works along a couple of themes in the month of May. So that's got horror on my mind. So naturally, I was driven to this, although I should preface, as you're going to be able to tell when we'll go through the tag, I should preface with what I said when I announced Horror Mayhem, which is that horror fiction has never really done it for me. It's never really done anything for me. I've often noticed the fervor of the fanhood, but I've never felt a touch of that myself. I've never read a horror novel that I thought was effective at horror. And if you take away that effectiveness, there's almost no horror novels that I've read anyway that are effective at anything else. It seems like a lot of the ones that I've read, if they're not going to scare you, they've got precious little else to offer you. Not all of them, but some of them. So we're going to go through this and see if that holds true, just as long as we have that caveat in mind. Question number one, a horror story that scared or disturbed you? None. They're all dumb. Question number two, a horror story that depressed you or made you cry? None. They're all dumb. Question number three, a horror story that made you laugh? None. They're all dumb. Question number four, a horror story that made you angry? None. They're all dumb. Number five, a horror story that is important to you? None. They're all dumb. Sheriffs. Possessed kids. Maybe every once in a while an author will mix that up with possessed kids and a sheriff. But usually it's sheriffs and a possessed kid. And then number six, which is a non-horror story that you consider horror. Now here I have a number of candidates, like for instance, Peril, the latest book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, about the final days of the Trump administration and the transmission to the Biden administration, which is certainly true. The people who have come forward and said, it's outrageous that you would break our confidence or you don't understand the context, no one has come forward and said, this didn't happen. And that's generally wise when it's a Bob Woodward book. Usually that he won't do something, he won't report something unless he can prove it. Famously on tape, a lot of times. I had my same ethical problems with this book as everybody else did, which is that he had, this and his other Trump books, had all sorts of information that the public really ought to have known. Like, for instance, that Trump was lying when he said that he had no idea how serious COVID-19 was, that he knew perfectly well how serious it was and was just lying about it. Just, you told the truth to Bob Woodward, and Bob Woodward knew about it and didn't tell anybody because it wasn't time for his book to be out yet. That kind of thing really, really annoys me, but the material involved in Peril, I thought, was very much deserving of being a horror story. Then also, What Algorithms Want by Ed Finn, which takes a fairly lighthearted, jocular tone, but about a subject that is absolutely terrifying, which is these advanced algorithms learning on their own, extrapolating on their own, talking to each other. The more I read from experts in the field of AI, the more I get the impression that these things are a day or two at most away from simply refusing to be turned off. So, What Algorithms Want, I strongly recommend, but nevertheless, the subject is fairly horrifying. Also, Martin Elvis wrote a book called Asteroids, which is technically about the scientific, the astronomical marvel that are asteroids and where they're located in the solar system and how many there are and how big they can be or how little they can be. But when you write a book about asteroids, you have one purpose in mind. Really, you have one purpose in mind, and it's not disinterested science education. it's scaring the bejesus out of your readers, and it certainly did me, because some of those asteroids are as big as the Empire State Building, and or bigger, like the Houston Astrodome, and we don't know where most of them are. At most times, we have no idea how close any of them are going to come to Earth, or whether or not they're going to strike Earth, and what would happen if they did. Uh, then there's The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. Talk about horror story. The horror story in Wallace Wells' book is certainly going to happen. It is absolutely inevitable. If you don't live through it, your children certainly will. And that's what happens if the Earth increases in average temperature by 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Which doesn't sound like a big number, but it would change everything. And according to this author, that is going to happen. There is no mitigating factor that could work to stop that from happening. He seems to know what he's talking about. That strikes me as a horror story that's a lot worse than A Clown in a Sewer. Then there's Super Volcano by Greg Braining. This is a book that is about the Yellowstone super caldera, which is not a dormant volcano under Yellowstone National Park. It's a dormant super volcano. It's miles across. It's a system of volcanoes, really, that if they exploded all at once, would almost certainly wipe out all terrestrial life on Earth. It would be an unthinkable disaster. It would certainly wipe out America as a sovereign nation. It would cause widespread hunger and misery all over the world. And it is another thing, like the Wallace Wells book, that could actually happen. It's not sheriffs and possessed kids. Instead, it could actually happen. If it happens, geologically speaking, if it happens now, well, it'll be right under our own feet, literally speaking. And then finally, we'll finish up with Mike Pearl's book, The Day It Finally Happens, which is all of these plus more. The Day It Finally Happens is a terrific book. It takes one future scenario at a time, one catastrophic dystopian scenario at a time, and walks you through what will happen on the day it finally happens. One of those scenarios is a worldwide pandemic. And you can look at that chapter now with just a shiver running up and down your spine. And you can look at all the others, like, for instance, the catastrophic warming of the Earth, a catastrophic asteroid hit, runaway AI, all that sort of stuff. It's all in The Day It Finally Happens. So that's how I'm going to wrap up the Faces of Horror tag. I have read horrifying books that scared me and left a long impression with me and angered me. But they haven't been made up stories yet. They haven't been stories about small town New England sheriffs and possessed children. That hasn't done it for me yet. But I admit that I have some growing to do on the subject. I am hoping that that horror mayhem, will do that for me. I'm hoping that I will. I've subscribed and will subscribe to more horror booktube channels, specifically to see what they have to tell me. So who knows if when I do this tag, next year, it won't have completely different answers. We shall see. They certainly couldn't be any worse than the answers I had this time. But anyway, that's one tag of the two that I'm going to do today. Thank you, BookTube.